dictator. He is an imperialist. He is a tyrant. He is much a threat to his own people, as he is to all of us. Mr. Speaker, this is a moment for unity, and it's especially a moment for European unity. All of the economic sanctions that are now finally being implemented have one clear objective: the complete economic isolation of the Russian state. Can the Prime Minister confirm that this is the objective and that he has agreed that with his international allies? That economic isolation.
Welcome those that are joining here.
On Putin and his network of oligarchs and
How's my sound? Does my sound good?
Countries around the world, sanctions on his banks and their ability to borrow and function, and sanctions on his energy and mineral companies. And as I said yesterday, it must finally mean clearing up the sewer of dirty Russian money that has been running through the city of London for years. And I know all the complications.
How's my sound, guys? Can you hear everything okay?
That the actions to be taken to suspend Russia from the SWIFT payment system, one of the steps that would hit the Putin regime the hardest. But just as we rightly seek to punish Putin, we must redouble our support and solidarity for the Ukrainian.
My lovely daughter Rebecca, aka Becky, is watching Minnie Mouse. So the innocence of youth.
To offer refuge and sanctuary where necessary to those that have been displaced. And what plans are in place to evacuate the families of UK citizens currently in Ukraine, given that commercial flights have now stopped? Mr. Speaker, let's not fall for the Kremlin propaganda that they are prepared to soak up any
Can't hear the
sanctions.
video? All right.
If we act now, if the sanctions are targeted enough, swift enough, severe enough, if we impose nothing less than economic isolation, Putin and his cronies will suffer the consequences of their actions. So let us act together, stand together, and most of all, let us stand with the people of Ukraine.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank again the right honourable gentleman for the wisdom and the statesmanship with which he's just spoken, and just on his points in particular, we've put 1,000 troops on standby to help with the humanitarian exodus in the adjacent countries. We have people in forward presence in the adjacent countries to help UK nationals come out. And he's quite right, Mr. Speaker, that the way to...
So here's the British. We got Joe Biden in... I guess they delayed it. Now it's not for another hour. All right, so Joe Biden is delayed. We're going to hang out with the British until the U.S. gets it together.
Make these sanctions work, as we discussed today in the G7, where there is a great deal of unity, is that we do them together and we do them at the same time, and that's what we're doing.
Can I just say to everybody, who's got some very important meetings, we'll be running this to 6:30. Those colleagues who don't get in, we are keeping a list like we did from the other day to try and ensure that everybody does get a voice in a very, you'll have to sit down. It's a very, very important
I feel like the British are always playing.
I now come to the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Tom Tudor.
Thank you. Mayor, first of all, huge friend the Prime Minister and his government today.
Audio's breaking up a little bit.
Introducing what sound like the toughest sanctions we've seen in years. May I ask him, however, to look wider than simply the Russian people and to look at all those who are enabling Putin's economy, those who sit on boards of the businesses that finance him, whether they are former chancellors of Germany or former prime ministers of France. May I ask him to look here, close to home, at those who enable, who propagate the propaganda that is being used by Putin to undermine his own people and free people everywhere, and to update the Treason Act so that we can identify them and call them what they are, traitors. Can I also ask the Prime Minister one last question, which is when he speaks to people around the world, that he speaks with the truth that he can in Russian through the BBC Russian service and starts to broadcast in languages other than Russian into Russia, so that all Russian peoples can know their oppression doesn't need to exist. They don't need to side with a tyrant. Prime Minister.
Yeah, I can dig that.
I thank you very much, and he's absolutely right that we have to look at those who abet the Putin regime, and there are many, many of them, and that's why we are looking at all sorts of ways in which we can address threats to this state, Mr. Speaker, and we are, of course, making sure that the messages from this House, which are so impressive in their unity, should be registered by the people of Russia, because we mean no ill towards them. They are as much, in many ways, the victims as the people of Ukraine of this appalling regime, and they need to know what's really going on.
Dame Angela Edel.
Yep. Every time they switch cameras.
Prime Minister, tell us.
Are they standing like in applause, or do you think they're done for now?
With the Russian troops going through Chernobyl, which sent a chill through a lot of people's thoughts when we heard about it.
It's going to be radioactive communists soon, guys.
Prime Minister, I thank the right honourable lady very much. I hesitate to give the House a running comment on what seems a very fluid and very dangerous situation, but to the best of my knowledge, she's right in what she says.
Dr. Julian.
Mr. Speaker, for 50 years, Britain gave sanctuary to the governments in exile of the occupied Baltic states. If, as appears likely, Ukraine gets overwhelmed, will we offer to give sanctuary to a government in exile pending Ukraine's future freedom?
Prime Minister.
Of course, I thank my friend. Of course, Mr. Speaker, we will give all support that we can, logistical or otherwise, as Britain always has done to governments in exile. And the point I made to President, one of the points I made to President Zelensky this morning was that it might be necessary for him to find a safe place for him and his cabinet to go.
With President Putin responsible for this catastrophic human tragedy, Liberal Democrats join all sides to stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, and I thank the Prime Minister for his statement. Today must
I just want to double check and see if Biden is still delayed. Yeah, they're definitely delayed for an hour on the U.S. side. We'll just hang out with the British.
Be a wake-up call. The West has been too complacent over Putin's threat for too long. We have taken for granted our fragile alliances, so crucial for the defense of freedom, emboldening Putin, this outrageous act of aggression. The West cannot be complacent any longer. So will the government reverse its proposed troop cuts to the British Army and offer far greater military support to our NATO allies in Eastern Europe? And Mr. Speaker, Putin must face the most punitive of sanctions. The world must isolate Russia like the rogue state it is, including the state-backed oil giant Rosneft, 20% owned by BP. So will the Prime Minister commit to banning UK investment in Russian oil and gas companies with immediate effect?
I think they should do that.
Prime Minister.
I have long puts on RSX, it's a Russian ETF.
On his point about investment in
Yeah,
Russian
puts
oil and
on
gas, as I've said,
RSX.
we move away from all our dependencies on Russian oil and gas, and that is the objective of the UK government. Well, we're lucky in this country that we have only 3% of our gas that comes from Russia. Other European countries are in a much more exposed position. On his point about supporting Eastern Europeans, we have, as he knows, doubled the size of our commitment to Estonia. We've gone bigger in Poland, another 350 Marines from 4-5 Commando. We're in the skies above Romania. I don't believe there's another country in NATO that is currently doing more to strengthen NATO's eastern defences.
Thank you, Mr. Kensington, a strong historical with Ukraine. So I welcome this robust approach. My constituency also has seen significant property investments by Russian investors. Can I urge my right honourable friend to accelerate the introduction of a register of beneficial ownership of property?
Yes, she's completely right, and we need to unpeel the facade of these companies, these shell companies, so we can see who owns the property concerned.
These guys aren't playing around, man. They are ready to do some real damage to Russia.
Was right when he warned that bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing, that the whole House will support the measures that the Prime Minister has just announced. Now, in his statement, he said our mission is clear diplomatically, politically, economically, and eventually
militarily. What did he mean by using the word militarily? Was he referring to providing further defensive weapons to enable Ukraine to defend itself?
Prime Minister.
Yes, I obviously don't want to go into detail because it is a very sensitive and difficult business. But yes, Mr. Speaker, we have done. We continue to do so, and I believe I have the support of the House in intending to continue to do so.
Bob Seeley.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Prime Minister for his words. And his
Why do they keep standing? Is that like a tradition?
On the crime bill and the kleptocracy cell. In relation to that, will there be a foreign lobbying bill? Will there be amendments to Libel and Data Protection Act to stop unscrupulous law firms offering intimidation services to oligarchs and kleptocrats? And will the NCA be properly funded, as the ISC report suggested, so it will be able to take on the kleptocrats, the autocrats, and the oligarchs in this country?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful. As I said in my opening statement, we are setting up a new combating kleptocracy cell in the National Crime Agency to target the very individuals that he mentions.
Sarah Champion.
Speaker, let's no illusion. We are actually enormous humanitarian crisis, which could see massive loss of life.
Stonked up, thank you for the super chat.
And all to suffer the war disaster.
I hope your new job is working out great. No, Daddy did not make mess. That's money.
Also likely to cause mass displacement of people, potentially triggering a significant refugee crisis in Europe. So can the Prime Minister tell us what he is doing to support the Ukrainian people who stay and those who choose to flee?
She makes a very important point, and I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker, because the humanitarian impact threatens to be enormous, and that's why I've said what I've said about.
They stand up to agree. Okay.
Those refugees as they come out of Ukraine, but we've got to make sure that we do everything we can to stabilise the Ukrainian economy, to support the government as far as we possibly can. That's why yesterday, on Tuesday, I should say, I announced the $500 million extra package of development aid on top of the £100 million we've already given. Other countries, our friends and allies, are working with us to do much more.
Sophie.
Sure.
You want this?
The international the Atlantic Charter, 1941, has been the most successful in the history of freedom and democracy. And as one of the architects of that order, we have a special responsibility to defend it. And whilst today's sanctions are extremely welcome, it cannot just be economic measures. We need a fundamental review of our military capability, including revisiting.
Thank you, Pradeep. Appreciate it.
May now be out of date.
I don't know what SGD is, but thank you for 5 of them.
The integrated review begins with the assertion that the most important area for our national security is the Euro-Atlantic area, as I believe I said to the Honourable General Opposite on Tuesday. And that remains fundamental, and that's why we've continued with the investment that we have in NATO, where the second biggest funder of NATO, as the Honourable Gentleman knows. But he's my honourable friend knows. But he's right in what he says about what's at stake. This is about the whole idea of that wonderful thing that was so inspiring when some of us were young, of a Europe whole and free. That fantastic revolution that happened in 1989 and 1990 when communism fell, Mr. Speaker. It was a great moment for humanity. We mustn't allow it to slip through our fingers.
Clive Lewis.
My child is opening my Ledger X hardware wallet.
The people of Norwich, that we show our solidarity with the people of Ukraine. The warm words will not defend the Ukrainian people. I've been speaking to people who have been liaising with Ukrainian trade unions, people who've been fighting privatisation and wage cuts. But they say one thing, that they will not run from their homes. They will defend their families. Those people need to be able to defend themselves. I support the Prime Minister's assertion that we will be providing more defensive capabilities for that end. But let me say one thing, Prime Minister and Mr. Speaker. Will you agree, Prime Minister, that we must have an end to this by a negotiated settlement and not by an escalation of military means?
Mr. Speaker. I think the whole House, everybody in the world, would want President Putin to have chosen the path of negotiation. He had that moment, and that's why, if you remember, we had that discussion in this House on Tuesday about that perilous moment which we all discussed.
I'm trying to keep her quiet, guys, but it's hard.
I'm afraid he's missed it. He's chosen the path of overwhelming violence and destruction. And I'm afraid that puts us on a very, very different course. And we have to accept that reality.
David Davis.
I think British Trump was right.
Everybody will wholeheartedly support the Prime Minister's sanctions, hopefully against all 140 Russian oligarchs that support Putin and against all the major banks. The Prime Minister also described the Russian state as a pariah state. And he's right, because they have broken international criminal law on a major scale. Can we actually implement our view of the pariah state by ensuring that everybody involved in that decision, if they leave Russia to go
You want to drink this?
face international criminal sanctions?
You want Daddy to get you some drink?
I thank my right honourable friend, and
let's
that
go
is
get some
exactly
juice.
what we can now do, thanks to the measures that this House has passed.
I'm going to get Becky some juice so she shuts up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, let me know what I missed.
This morning we woke to the worst possible news, and I make no apology in hoping for a diplomatic solution. However, my party and I condemn the escalating Russian aggression. This is a fluid and developing situation, but we are now in uncharted territory. I can update the House that whilst there have been calls in this place for Alex Salmond to cease broadcasting on Russia Today, negotiations have obviously been happening in the background, and I can confirm that he has suspended broadcasting on Russia Today. But we must prepare for the worst. And I would ask the Prime Minister, what strategy is he bringing forward to increase the capacity of North Sea oil and gas so that we can support ourselves and EU member states and protect our people from a further increase in the cost of living?
Mr. Speaker, I must say I disagree profoundly with what he has had to say about negotiating now. I don't think that option is open to us. We must do our best to support and protect the people of Ukraine and working with our international friends and allies to constrict what Vladimir Putin can do. And on his point about Russia Today, Mr. Speaker, I simply observe that the former leader of the Scottish Nationalist Party is his leader. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. His leader. I understand the pleas he entered in defence and mitigation. They don't seem to cut much ice with me.
Zoris, thank you for the super chat.
Steve Crabb is the name.
Mr. Speaker, I strongly welcome the further set of sanctions announced by the Prime Minister this evening, and we look forward to further steps being taken in the days ahead and not being held back by perhaps some of the slower moving members of the alliance in Europe. But does the Prime Minister agree with me that if sanctions are really to bite on Putin and his gangster government, then inevitably it will mean cost and inconvenience to UK economic interests, but that cost and inconvenience will be of as nothing compared to what the people of Ukraine are going through, and we stand with them this evening.
Yes, I'm afraid my right honourable friend is right. It will mean cost, it will mean inconvenience, it will mean difficulty for us in the UK. But that will be a price worth paying, Mr. Speaker, for defeating the objectives of Vladimir Putin and showing that aggression does not pay.
Yep.
Dame Diana Johnson.
Could I just follow up on the question from the Honourable Member for the Isle of Wight about the Combating Kleptocracy cell in the National Crime Agency, and just seek from the Prime Minister a view whether additional powers will be required for the National Crime Agency and additional resources for them to do their work.
I thank very much. They will, of course, they have plenty of existing statute, but the additional powers that they will have, amongst other things, will be the ability to peel back the facade of ownership, which I think will be extremely valuable.
Jonathan Ginocchio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whilst this terrible, appalling incident is, of course, directly the cause of Russia, I think it's appropriate that we also recognise that over the last 14 years, the UK, the EU, the US collectively have not been attentive to Russia in the way that we should. Can my right honourable friend
a little late for
now
that.
say that whatever happened in the past, moving forward, we are not going to let Russia fall between our fingers again?
Mr. Speaker, I think the lesson of 2014 is that the whole of the West failed to respond in the way that we should. And when a sovereign country was invaded and part of that country was occupied, I'm afraid it was quite wrong that we tried to manage the situation with the various diplomatic processes that we did, which in the end produced absolutely nothing except finally this catastrophic invasion today. We had a bitter lesson, Mr. Speaker, about how to deal with Vladimir Putin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with
How
Prime Minister
old
that
is
it seems
Putin?
like
Is he
the
like in his 70s or
curtain
is he
has
like
now come
60?
down on that era that began in 1989, and we've lived in an era of change since then. This now feels like a change of era. In this new era, the permissive environment that we created for the Kremlin's quartermasters to live, to invest, and to party in London, sometimes with the Prime Minister himself, that must now come to an end. So let me ask the Prime Minister this. Will he undertake to ensure that every visa issued to a Russian dual national is now reviewed? And where proximity to President Putin is proven, that citizenship should be stripped away.
Ooh.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we are doing that, though I think it is... I just think it is
That's an aggressive move.
Remembering the point that I made the other day, not every Russian is a bad person, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, can I welcome the package of sanctions the Prime Minister has set out? And whilst I understand why it's not been possible to suspend Russia from the SWIFT payment system at this stage, can I ask what work we're doing with our European allies to offer them reassurance so that eventually we can get to a position when they can be suspended? Because that is by far and away the biggest thing that will isolate them.
That would be a big deal if they get boxed out of SWIFT.
My honourable friend is spot on. The biggest thing would be if everybody stopped taking Russian hydrocarbons. But SWIFT is extremely important, and it's a Belgian company, as I'm sure the House knows. We're raising it. We're trying to make progress with our friends, but for obvious reasons, it has to be done in unison.
Here's Minnie Mouse.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. This morning I spoke with friends in Kyiv who were leaving the country with their family, their children, and we've all seen the scenes from the capital of cars trying to get out. So I send my deepest thanks to the embassy team there who are doing all they can to support people. But can I ask the Prime Minister about two areas of support for Ukraine? Economic support and continuing support for defensive capability. Will both of those areas of support intensify, and can he assure the House, I see the Foreign Secretary telling me so, but can he assure the House that the government will continue the deepest possible conversations with the government in Ukraine to ensure that no matter the assault that comes to it from Vladimir Putin, we will be supporting them in a deeply meaningful sense?
Yes, on that last point, the answer is certainly yes, Mr. Speaker. Just for instance, the other day I was looking at two British minesweepers being refitted in Recife, as I'm sure he knows, which are due to go to Ukraine. The question will be access, Mr. Speaker. That's what it all depends on.
Sir Robert Butler.
Mr. Speaker, it's crystal clear from this act of naked aggression that Putin doesn't seek Finlandization on his borders. He seeks at best to recreate a Belarus in the south, or at worst to dismember the sovereign state of Ukraine. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that that does mean that we need to build upon the outcome of our integrated defence review? We do need to think differently about Eastern Europe from the past. And then at home, with his announcement around bringing forward economic crime measures, it seems that there is a consensus in this House that can allow us to bring forward emergency legislation to bring those important measures to really hit those people.
Finland should join NATO immediately.
Speaker, I think that is clearly the will of the House, and it is the will of the government, and that's why we'll be taking those important measures, bringing them forward on Monday.
Mr. Speaker, my thoughts are with the Ukrainian people at this time. And while I welcome the sanctions the Prime Minister's announced today, can he update the House on whether he plans to sanction the major state-owned Russian banks such as Serverbank and Gazprom Bank and the non-state bank Alpha Bank?
Definitely Gazprom.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Is that sound better now? I turned it up a little bit.
The Ukrainian POW chapel at Lockerbie in my constituency is a focal point for the Ukrainian diaspora in Scotland, and prayers are being said there for their fellow countrymen. But what Ukrainians in the UK have identified, being grateful for the military support that has already been forthcoming, is that there is an immediate need for medical battlefield supplies, for warm clothing for troops, and for camouflage gear. And can my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, assure the House that they will be forthcoming?
I thank my right honourable friend very much. He raises a very important issue, and we are working on exactly those supplies right now.
And Jones.
I thank the Prime Minister for his statement and very much welcome the sanctions that he's announced today. But can he give an assurance that the sanctions that are going to target individuals will also target relatives and connected parties? And like the Honourable Right Member for Swindon, he mentioned the Economic Crime Bill. We've got the review of the Official Secrets Act and the Foreign Registration Act. Why can't we bring them forward and do them now? They would get huge support, and we've been waiting for some of these for nearly 2 years.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell him that we will certainly be making sure that we are able to sanction and do sanction relatives and other interested parties, and there'll be a rolling programme of intensifying sanctions.
Brisbane Blunt.
Having been one of the officials that accompanied the then Defence Secretary to both Moscow and Kiev in 1993, I'm in no doubt that the signatories of the United States and the United Kingdom on the Budapest Memorandum gave Ukraine the confidence to give up its nuclear deterrent. Will my right honourable friend support the United States to whatever extent it is prepared to go, to stand alongside the United States in giving whatever military support it's prepared to do so to Ukraine?
Okay. Will the British join the US in the military?
Remind the House of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which had exactly that effect and created exactly that obligation on us as one of the signatories.
Very sure.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will be aware that we are on this side of the House very keen on these sanctions. Although, does he share with me the worry that the record of driving out dictators and demagogues with these sanctions isn't always that successful? Does he share my concern that if we read what Putin has been saying these last few hours, he's a man that might not stop at Ukraine. He might go into a NATO country, and are we playing that scenario?
I don't see that coming, personally.
Many of us think that might be the next step.
That would be the end of Russia.
The right honourable gentleman is absolutely right to raise that appalling possibility, and it is vital that we reaffirm again that under Article 5 of the NATO treaty, we stand foursquare behind every one of our NATO allies and will come to their defence.
Ian Duncan.
Speaker, can I say to my honourable friend that with Ukrainian men and women dying to fight against the Russians for their freedom today, those who are calling for negotiation at this point can only please that rambling wreck of a neo-Nazi sitting in the Kremlin, and they should be shunned. Secondly, can I just say to my honourable friend today, the ambassador from Ukraine asked desperately whether NATO would look at a no-fly zone. I know it's a difficult choice, but could my right honourable friend step to the dispatch box and make it clear that in this particular case, he rules nothing out?
Mr. Speaker, I know that
that would be war if that happens.
Is a great military expert, and he will understand. And I understand the attractions of the no-fly zone. I remember the no-fly zone that was created in 1991, as I recall, in northern Iraq. The situation here is very different. We would face the risk of having to shoot down Russian planes, Mr. Speaker, and that is something that I think the House would want to contemplate with caution.
Lord Russell Moyle.
Dude, that would be a big deal if that happened.
State money. I hope the Prime Minister can give me reassurance that that will include our overseas territories and dependencies that must be included in this. And I note that there are, Mr. Speaker, protests in a number of Russian cities across Russia at the moment, and celebrities in Russia have been speaking out. I do hope that we will be offering all the support that we can to those people who are likely to be shunned by the fascist imperialist Putin regime.
Donkeys. That's Louisa.
Yes, and can I say, Mr. Speaker, that one of the reasons why I want to keep our fantastic British embassy staff in Moscow, even though the temptation is there simply to sunder diplomatic relations with Putin, I want to keep them there to support groups such as the ones he mentions.
Bob Stewart.
Mr. Speaker, I've given evidence of 4 war crimes trials. It was genocide and crimes against humanity people were charged with. Could I ask my right honourable friend and the House to agree with me that any Russian
here we go.
kills a Ukrainian must remember that one day they may well be brought to court for crimes against humanity or genocide?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and not just any Russian combatant, Mr. Speaker, but anyone who sends a Russian into battle to kill innocent Ukrainians.
Bill Esterson.
You want Louisa or Bruno?
President Zelensky has called for the toughest possible sanctions. For them to be the toughest possible, that must mean immediate. So in his statement, he talked about in the next session for the economic measures, including on Companies House and on the Register of Overseas Property Ownership. But in answer to the Right Honourable Member for Swindon, he said something about bringing forward on Monday. Which of these is it? And if it is Monday, will it have the same effect as is required for that immediate action?
We'll be bringing it forward on Monday, Mr. Speaker, and we want to have, I hope, and I'm grateful for the support of the opposition, we want immediately to start cracking down on these individuals.
These British are pretty hawkish. I wonder what Biden's going to say.
Speaker, the whole House will welcome the enhanced package of sanctions that the Prime Minister has announced today. But can I raise the question of football, much beloved to Russian hearts, and in particular issues of ownership, of property and of shareholdings, and of the future participation of Russian clubs in international matches?
He's right. He's attached a great deal of sentimental importance to football, and they hope to have the UEFA Championship final in St. Petersburg. I cannot for the life of me see how that can currently go ahead.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Putin's war on Ukraine is brutal, illegal and a calculated attack on peace and stability in Europe. Plaid Cymru fully supports the actions and sanctions announced today. Putin, his cronies and their personal fortunes must pay for their actions. On a visit to Ukraine, Plaid Cymru leaders spoke to Ukrainian soldiers, government officials and organisations, admiring Ukrainian people for their strength and their resilience, and they are now in harm's way. With Poland organising medical assistance and Slovakia opening its borders to refugees, will his government mobilise and resource a global effort to support and aid people fleeing this horrific conflict?
Again, Mr. Speaker, I thank her very much for her support and her resolve, and I want to assure her that we're of course working with our international friends to prepare for a humanitarian crisis.
Diana Davis.
Speaker, earlier this afternoon I had the opportunity to speak to on a Zoom call with a number of Ukrainian MPs who were all calling for additional support One of the key things they were discussing is concerns of their communications networks may get shut down. So can I urge the Prime Minister to ensure we're doing all we can to provide things like satellite phones, to make sure they can still communicate, not just internally, but with us here in the UK too?
Mr. Speaker, she's absolutely right. The Honourable, my honourable friend is absolutely right. There is a threat to communications already, and we're observing it in the contacts that we're having with people in Ukraine. Satellite phones.
If my daughter's sound is annoying you guys too much, I just pinned the comment for where the stream is actually coming from. You can just watch it there.
We've rightly heard a lot about tougher trade sanctions today, but nothing about ridding Russian state influence from our democracy. Will the Prime Minister commit to investigating all political donations received from people with links to Putin? And will his government finally bring forward measures to clean up the corrupt Russian money that for far too long has been laundered in the UK?
So, Mr. Speaker, all political donations are properly registered and monitored, and I can tell her that we are putting forward and progressively over the last few days and weeks and today the biggest ever package to crack down on dirty Russian money, not just from Russia but from anywhere.
Steve Baker.
Speaker, I welcome these sanctions today. My right honourable friend's been crystal clear that all Europe needs to end dependence on Russian oil and gas. Could he tell us a little bit more about how he intends to see that comes to pass?
Thank you. I thank my right honourable friend. The key thing is to get people, first of all, to recognise the scale of their dependency, as in any addiction. That's what we're doing, and the UK government's been making that point the whole time to our friends, because it's got worse since 2014. But what we're also doing is helping countries, for instance in the Baltic states, to go further and faster with renewable technology.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think everyone knows that the Ukraine is a major producer of grain, and unfortunately, because of these awful events, there are likely to be consequences for many countries, including our own. Could I ask the Prime Minister to look again at our food security proposals and make sure that we are secure ourselves and not reliant so much as we have been in the past?
Yeah, he's absolutely right, and food security is an important consideration. And one of the many things that our fantastic Ukrainian community have done in the last few years is help us in that very sector.
Andrew Bridget.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that Western Europe's ongoing reliance on Russian oil and gas has been a major factor in emboldening President Putin in the mistaken belief that he can invade his peaceful neighbour with relative impunity? And in the UK, shouldn't we refocus our energy policy on maximising the use of our own natural resources, looking again at fracking while we invest in low-carbon alternatives?
Yes, the honourable gentleman is totally right. My honourable friend is totally right when he talks about the excessive dependence on hydrocarbons. We're moving away from it.
Thank you, Zoris. I appreciate you. Thanks for the super chat.
A merit, I think he and I might be in agreement on this. There is a merit in a transitional phase in continuing with the use of hydrocarbons in this country, rather than pointlessly importing them from abroad.
Mr. Speaker, Putin's imperial bloodlust won't stop at Ukraine. We're rightly focused on sanctions, military and humanitarian support, and our commitment to Ukrainian freedom. But the Prime Minister knows there's been a phenomenal increase in Russian submarine activity over the last 20 years. Our undersea cables carry more than 95% of all Western military, diplomatic, commercial, financial and personal communications. The consequences of these cables being weaponised is terrifying. Can he assure me that countering this threat is part of our ongoing dialogue with allies?
She's absolutely right, and that there is a continual struggle going on beneath the surface of the sea, as she knows, between submarines that are out to sever cables and those of us who are trying to make sure that those links are maintained.
Sir Charles Walker.
Mr. Speaker, following on from my right honourable and gallant friend's question about war crimes, I suspect those crimes are already being committed by Russian soldiers against their Slavic brothers and sisters. Can the Prime Minister join with his NATO heads of state setting out at an early stage how war crimes will be prosecuted, so all Russian soldiers, field officers, generals and, of course, as the Prime Minister said, politicians are brutally aware of where they will end up in a few years' time.
He's absolutely right. And thank him very much, my honourable friend. That's why we're working on setting up a particular international war crimes tribunal for those involved in war crimes in the Ukraine theatre.
It's been incredibly ruthless. President Putin is also incredibly rich, with one assessment saying that his personal wealth is up to $200 billion. So can the Prime Minister ensure that President Putin himself pays a heavy price by targeting his own cash and assets?
Yeah, steal that shit.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Speaker, and not just
I hope
him,
they take his money.
but as the House has heard over the last few days, as many of his immediate cronies and family as we can hit.
Second Batty.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for all that he's done. Just before the statement, I spoke to some of the Ukrainian protesters who are outside. One of them was holding back tears as she spoke about her mother in a cellar as her house is surrounded by Ukrainian tanks. So any member of this House who's asking for a negotiated settlement needs to go and speak to them, because all they want is to live their lives as free and peaceful people. Will the Prime Minister confirm to the people of Ukraine that he will do everything he can to end the tyranny of Putin, and that he will do everything he can to make sure that they live as a peaceful and free people?
Yes, I certainly can confirm that, Mr. Speaker. And what I can also say is that I believe by making this invasion, I think that President Putin has done more than anybody else to bring his regime to an end. Because I think in the end he will pay a huge price for what he has done, and I know that this House will want to make it so.
Maybe. We shouldn't underestimate the Russian propaganda machine in their own country.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome and support the measures outlined by the Prime Minister today? Putin is a gangster and a despot who has been trying to undermine and subvert democracy across the world for years. One of the tools that he uses is through political donations to political parties, including in this country. Will the Prime Minister commit today to ridding the democracy in London from ridding Russian money out of democracy in this country?
Yes, of course, Mr. Speaker.
Flight driven.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland today triggered Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty, and I think I heard that we are going to be joining in those discussions. But can my right honourable friend assure our NATO allies in Eastern Europe that we stand firmly with them, particularly the Baltic states that have significant Russian populations?
I thank you very much. She's completely right, and that's why one of the first things we did was to strengthen our presence in Estonia in the way that I've described, and our Canadian friends are strengthening their presence in Latvia, and we will make sure that we give the Baltic states in particular, who seceded from the Soviet Union, who became free and independent at that amazing moment, give them all the security that they deserve.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's overwhelming evidence that Russian state actors have been involved in trying to disrupt and destabilise Western democracies using social media platforms such as Facebook. So what is the government doing to ensure that this isn't used in these events?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, I think in an answer a couple of days ago, we've got no evidence of disruption of UK elections or electoral events as a result of Russian activity.
He got elected with their support.
Is there to provide such protections?
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his statement, and indeed thank the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition for his supportive and moving words. But can I also reinforce the point made by my honourable friend for Huntington? Why has it come to this pass? How has the West in general, and the United Kingdom in particular, been so asleep at the switch for such a long period of time? And I commend the Defence and Security Review, but isn't it now time to ask what the permanent and impartial machinery of our government does, failing to provide ministers with consistent advice about the strategic threats that our country faces?
Mr. Speaker, I think there are there are all sorts of reasons for the failure of the West to take sufficient account of the threat of Vladimir Putin since 2014, but the two biggest are oil and gas.
You want mini maps?
Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, with cyber attacks and falsehoods, Russia is peddling lies
You want
today.
puppies or mini maps?
Now, observers on the ground are crucial to relay the truth. Now, in recent weeks, the UK has withdrawn its team from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission because staff safety is key. But can the Prime Minister look again to support international efforts like this to get to the facts and counter Russian disinformation?
Yeah, we're going to see zooms in.
I thank the MMR teams. They're wonderful. I've met them, and they do a fantastic job. I'm sorry that they've had to be withdrawn for the duty of care reasons that he rightly alludes to, and we will keep it under constant review.
Liam Fox.
The 1994 Budapest Memorandum saw Ukraine give up its nuclear weapons in return for a security guarantee not only signed
This
by
is a good question.
and the United States, but by Russia. Does my right honourable friend believe that Ukraine would have been invaded had it retained its nuclear weapons? And
Good
what does
question.
it say about the value of a Russian signature on any international agreement?
Well, it's clear that President Putin sets no store by international law, whatever, and he's that is just one of the legal obligations that he has torn up.
Kirsty Black.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, we awoke this morning to images of innocent families cowering in tube stations. We know the Putin regime's propensity for repression and tyranny, particularly when it comes to...
I'm going to tune down this chick real quick. One of the things I think that we're going to see change is that the whole idea of nuclear deproliferation, that's gone. I don't think there's any country...
Yes, of course, the third sector plays.
All right, fine. I don't think there's any country on Earth anymore, including Iran, that's going to be willing to give up its nuclear weapons anymore, because they just watched what happened with Russia.
Specifically ruling out the threat of creeping normalisation, because this House should be under no doubt that Putin is well prepared. He has hundreds of billions of foreign currency reserves. He has a military that has been tested. And will the Prime Minister do everything he can to convert the current intent into frameworks that cement our intent over time, because he is betting on the fact that it won't.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, because the plan that the G7 have agreed on and our friends and partners have agreed on is that Putin must fail. Putin must not succeed in this venture. But we've got to put in place all the steps we need to take, diplomatically, economically, and yes, militarily, in order to ensure that that is the case, and that's what we're doing.
Very good.
The Prime Minister is right to have set out the most stringent possible set of sanctions against the government of Russia. Can he outline for the House what the implications will also be for cooperation at the International Space Station?
I thank him. I thank him very much. We will have to see what further downstream effects there are on collaboration of all kinds. I must say that hitherto I have been broadly in favour of continuing artistic and scientific collaboration, but in the current circumstances, it's hard to see how even those can continue as normal.
Sir John Hayes.
Speaker, the mix of practice and principle is the test of democratic politics, exemplified at its best when this House comes together in common cause. The test of leadership is the mix of vision and will, and the Prime Minister is to be commended for his willful, clear-sighted determination. So will he now reassure the House that he's in close touch with those countries close to Ukraine, where nerves will be frayed, and that will he send them an urgent message that this House and this nation will always stand alongside and behind free nations?
He is, the right honourable gentleman, as so often, is precisely right, and that's why, together with my right honourable friends, the Defence Secretary and Foreign Secretary, we've been visiting Poland, Romania, the Balts, all those who are now feeling such deep unease at what is happening.
Mr. Speaker, as we speak, the Softcom float tanker NS Challenger
is berthed at Sullombo in Shetland, taking on a load of crude oil for export. Sovcomflot, as the Prime Minister may know, is a company owned and operated by the Russian government. My constituents, Mr. Speaker, are asking me why they should be loading oil onto a Russian tanker while Russian troops are marching into the Ukraine. I cannot think of any good answer to give them. So, can the Prime Minister tell me, will anything that he has announced today ensure that that will not happen again in the future?
Well, I can tell him, in fact, thank you very much. I will of course, immediately investigate what is happening with the Sovcomflot oil tanker. But the result of the measures that the House passed the other day is that we can now target any entity, any company that has any relation with the Russian state. So we have that power.
Speaker, tyrants and megalomaniacs invade countries because they think they can get away with it. And the way to deal with bullies is to stand up with them. So I'm sure he will acknowledge that the way the West responds to this aggression will have repercussions not
He
just for
says,
Russia
stand
and
up with
Ukraine,
Putin.
but for other bullies like China as well. And will he be mindful of the need to show support to Russia's smaller southerly neighbours, especially Georgia and Armenia, who feel particularly vulnerable at this time?
Yes, I thank him. He's right, because the read across, the knock-on is obvious for Georgia and Armenia. What he proposes to create, Putin, is a new sphere of influence, a new Yalta, in which those countries come behind his new Iron Curtain.
Stephen Wakefield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of this House with Ukrainian heritage, this issue particularly troubles me. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for his tone of his statement and the resolute and swift action that he's proposing in tackling Russia, but the resolute and swift support he's offering to the people of Ukraine. During his speech, he also highlighted the issues of the cost of living and the rise of fuel prices. Could he also touch on what further action the government will take in order to address that issue?
I thank him very much, and I think he's quite right, because I think people across the country will be thinking about the effect on us all of the increase in the price of oil and gas as a result of war in Ukraine. We will continue to do everything we can to help people to abate the cost, to support people through councils, through all the funds that we're giving, the reduction in council tax, Mr. Speaker. But the best thing that we can do is ensure that people are in good, well-paying jobs, and that is in that we are certainly succeeding. But in the medium and the long term, we've got to have more self-reliance in this country on our own energy supplies, and that is what this government is also committed to building.
Jeffrey Clifton-Brown.
One of the most important economic sanctions we can take against Russia is by freezing its sovereign debt. Will my right honourable friend confirm that the bill proposed on Monday on economic crime will include powers to do so?
Mr. Speaker, we're taking the most powerful measures against Russia and the Russian economy that have ever been taken. I think probably the most powerful ever taken by any country. And Russia will no longer be able to raise any sovereign debt on UK markets.
Olivia Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the Prime Minister what support we will be providing Ukrainian citizens settled in the UK who wish to reunite with their family members still residing in Ukraine. Many have watched their cities rapidly get caught up in this conflict and are keen to know what more we could be doing to support them to reunite their families.
Mr. Speaker, we will make sure that we support Ukrainian nationals who need to leave to visit to come to this country to meet their relatives. Of course, we'll do that.
Steve McPartland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud the Prime Minister in this country are leading international support for our friends in Ukraine. Domestically, will the Prime Minister be providing more support for organisations such as our NHS, public sector organisations and businesses that will now be the subject of Russian cyber attacks?
He's right to point to this risk, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's foresighted. We're investing massively in cyber protection. I think another £2.6 billion we're putting in. I think in the last few years we've tackled 3,000 more than 3,000 cyber attacks. It is a risk. It's a risk that I'm afraid we must run in the cause of freedom.
Matt Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to offer my wholehearted support for much tougher sanctions against President Putin and his dreadful regime. Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman from Lockerbie mentioned earlier, there are many historic Ukrainian communities in Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and indeed I would like to commend the work of the Reading Ukrainian Centre. I would like to ask the Prime Minister what additional support can the government give to these very valuable community groups and centres around the country who offer such support to families, friends, relatives, both in the UK and in the Ukraine.
I think, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the most important thing we can do for the Ukrainian community in this country is thank them, recognise them for everything that they've done for us in the last decades. They've been an amazing addition to the UK economy, to our cultural and artistic life.
John Barrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House is united in its condemnation, but I suggest to the Prime Minister that the lessons to be addressed from this affair started with the invasion of Georgia, Russia's invasion of Georgia in 2008 and not 2014. And given, many of us across the House have been warning about Russia, and yet the response has been weak. Does the Prime Minister accept that as we enter the battle for democracy globally, we have got to understand that the sooner you square up to the playground bully, the better, and that we adequately support our hard and soft power to do that?
Yeah, Daddy's right here.
Yes, he is quite right, and I know that by soft power he's thinking of also of the British Council, which can have such a wonderful beneficial effect across Russia, and I've seen its work across Russia. But Mr. Speaker, he's right about
Biden's getting ready to speak, so we're going to flip over to Biden when he gets started.
We should have done it ages ago. I think the scales have fallen from the eyes of many of our friends in Parliament.
If anybody's watching the U.S. speech, let me know when Biden's getting started, and we'll flip over.
In an earlier response, the Prime Minister suggested that this country would welcome people who were reuniting with family here. I have a constituent who's Ukrainian, but a British citizen who's trying to bring her mother from Ukraine, but being turned down because she is over 18. Her mother is on her own, has no family, so naturally she's frightened. So will we see a change in the Home Office to enable British citizens who are Ukrainian to bring their vulnerable family here?
Yes, I thank her very much. I think I read out a helpline number in the House on Tuesday. I don't have it again. There is a number both in Lviv and in this country. But if she could do me the favour and send me the details, well, I'll take them up.
Richard Drax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend my honourable friend and his ministers for the firm stance they're taking? None of us know where or what Mr. Putin's longer-term aims are. If Ukraine falls,
The UK one is live.
his covetous eye might land on the Baltic states and other vulnerable.
Yeah, you guys in the comments, let me know when Biden's getting started. We'll flip over to the U.S.
NATO members that if one Russian boot lands on NATO soil, military force will be met by military force.
Yes, and what is so encouraging, Mr. Speaker, is that the whole House understands the vital importance of that Article 5 guarantee that we make to every one of the 30 members of NATO.
Tony Lloyd. Sir Tony.
The Prime Minister quite rightly pits this as being a battle between the party of war and those who support international
Gordon
law.
Finch, that is some of the dumbest shit I have ever heard.
Government in Ukraine, that's the government of President Zelensky. If they are forced to move, forced possibly into exile in the short run or the longer run, will the Prime Minister state very clearly that we will make sure they can be a functional and effective government wherever they operate from?
It's a very important point that he raises. I'm grateful, and that's why in our discussions with President Zelensky, we are seeing what we can do to give them the practical support that they need to continue.
Robert Jenny.
The City of London is a global asset whose enduring success doesn't rest on dirty money. It rests on a commitment to excellence and on the adherence with the rule of law. So it's right that we now use that as a way to show global leadership, can I encourage my right honourable friend to sanction all of the remaining Russian banks, to sanction the executives associated with them, and I notice that many are resigning today, to publish a further list of individuals, resident in this country or otherwise, to be sanctioned, and to redouble his excellent efforts to suspend Russia from SWIFT as the single most effective immediate step that the West could do to put pressure on Vladimir Putin.
Just a few minutes, baby, okay?
I thank him very much. I thank him particularly for his important testimonial to the City of London, whose work should not be sullied, Mr. Speaker, by association with ill-gotten Russian money. But the programme that he set out for sanctions is exactly the right one, and the one the government is following.
Right, King. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Will the Prime Minister reiterate that our quarrel is not with the Russian people? It is with their leader, Vladimir Putin, and he has committed a very, very grave error.
He is so right, and I know that is what the House thinks. We admire the Russian people. Our links to the Russian people go back to the time when we stood shoulder to shoulder to fight fascism with the Russian people. Russia's contribution to culture, to art, to literature, to music, unparalleled. It is an extraordinary country, and nothing that we do or say should obscure that.
Winston Churchill created the Council of Europe as a bastion against fascism and communism. And since the fall of communism, Russia has set great importance by its membership as a fig leaf of respectability. Every time our Conservative group has tried to get them expelled, we've been foiled by Russian gold. Will the Prime Minister now instruct his ambassador on the Council of Europe to move for the immediate expulsion of Russia from the Council of Europe, so there is no place for gangsters in the halls of civilized nations?
Yes, I think eloquently put, Mr. Speaker, and he's dead right. And I think that my honourable friend Henley made the point the other day, and I certainly, who's on the Council of Europe, I certainly agree with that.
Geraint Davis.
Mr. Speaker, so many Russians
Gordon Finch is going to learn some Marxism now.
On Ukraine as they would see an attack of their father on their mother, because there's such intimate family relationships between these two groups. And today, thousands of Russians are protesting in cities against their domestic law, against this awful war. Will he provide them with his support? Will he amplify their support to help reduce the support, any support there is for this ridiculous war, and also provide sanction and safe haven for people, refugees, including troops who may want to re-engage, the troops outside of Ukraine, so they can re-engage, so we can win this war at home and abroad?
He makes a series of extremely important observations, and yes, I think it's vital that we get the message across to the whole of Russia about what is really going on. They're being lied to.
My key takeaway from this whole thing is that the British have a much better way of asking and answering questions in their parliament than we do in the US. They're actually having a discussion, and they're not wasting time. This is so much better than what we do in the US.
Prime Minister for yet again coming to House to keep us informed and for his leadership in this crisis. He was right to provide military aid to Ukraine, but the Ukrainian ambassador did ask for our support in a no-fly zone today.
Buck, I silenced him for 300 seconds because he was starting to piss me off. He's going to learn some Marxist fascism now.
I think it's pretty clear to the House, Mr. Speaker, that we're trying to keep all our options open on this front. Some of them, frankly, may be more practicable than others, and I think we must also have a dose of realism about what we can do on the military front. But we will keep all things under review.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker, many of the residents in my constituency come from a number of the countries on the eastern flank and still have relatives living there. Obviously, like us, they'll be deeply concerned about the humanitarian impact of the crisis. So, what steps is the government taking to prepare for the humanitarian issues? And with the 1,000 troops on standby to help with humanitarian assistance, will they now be deployed?
I think she raises a very important point, and what we're seeing now, tragically, is people moving west out of Kyiv, columns of traffic, as I'm sure the House knows. People already moving into southeastern Poland.
We've got to wait for the president, and then we can.
And then it's nap time. The president of Poland, Prime Minister of Poland as well, we're there to help.
I know our president is very slow. He's very sleepy.
Statement today and for his strong
He's still got to wake up from his nap.
I want to ask him about preventing sexual
And then it's your nap
violence
time.
in conflict. In November last year, we issued a strong statement which said that the use of sexual violence as a weapon in conflict is a red line akin to the use of chemical weapons. Will he reaffirm that commitment today, and will he send a strong message to Russia that the international community will not tolerate the use of sexual violence in conflict?
Yes, and I thank her for all the work that she's done on that issue. It's something that the UK government has campaigned on for a long time, and indeed raised the issue very greatly in public international consciousness. I think it should be treated as a war crime like any other, and people who perpetrate sexual violence in conflict can expect to be tried in those tribunals.
John Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In seeking to redraw the boundaries of Europe through bloodshed, Putin has attacked not only the Ukraine but all of us, and we stand with the Ukraine and standing for the rule of law. I welcome the sanctions that he's announced, but I was confused by his response on Russian disinformation, which he seemed to imply would be addressed by the online safety bill. That is many, many, many months away. Russian disinformation is organized, their bots are state-sponsored. What steps will he take to address them?
I think we've got and she raised a good point, but we've got, what we're doing is a massive, positive Stratcoms campaign in Russian, in Ukrainian, to make sure that people get the truth and they hear the truth.
Adam Holloway. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we've noticed this afternoon, virtually everyone in this House has supported the efforts towards resistance over the last few months and in these days. I imagine the House will also support a very different sort of warfare under occupation over the coming months and possibly years. But the House will also have noticed the marvellous way the Prime Minister has spoken directly to the Russian people today. And I hope that he will bear in mind that at the moment public opinion in Russia is rather different. That does underline the importance of accurate information.
He is quite right, and I thank him. He's a distinguished former soldier, and he knows that truth is the first casualty. We have to make sure that we are telling people exactly what is going on, and to the best of my knowledge at the moment, the Ukrainians are resisting much more strongly than some people had thought that they would. Who knows?
All right, it's
how long they
1:30.
can
Let's look
keep
for
going.
Joe
Let's
Biden.
hope, and they can, and let's encourage them to do so.
91,000 people waiting
Get
for
the
Joe
message
Biden.
out, as well. I think that is our job.
Chris Bryant. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is absolutely right. We equivocated shamelessly after Crimea. We were spineless. We must not be spineless now, because what will inevitably happen is either the Baltic states, one of the members of NATO, or perhaps Sweden or Finland will feel the wrath of Putin next. And that will mean British action. Don't we need to try and set in train now a process whereby Putin himself ends up in the dock in a court? Norman Burkitt said, who was the alternate British judge at Nuremberg, said at Nuremberg, initiating a war of aggression is not only an international crime, it is the supreme international crime, differing only from other war crimes in that it contains within itself the accumulated evil.
Uh-oh. They're flipping over to the United States, I think. Huh. All right, Eurovision is ditching the Parliament. All right. I guess Eurovision decided that it's time for Joe Biden to speak. Maybe. We'll let this go another minute here. This is interesting. That must have been a mistake on their part. It's just an error. Yeah, it's a song. That's right. It's a song because somebody messed up. Yeah. Craig Thomas, thank you. No, it's not Valhalla Calling Me. It's a different song. Thank you, Craig Thomas. I appreciate you. I wonder if this is just an error, like somebody over at Eurovision lost link or something like that. And now it's just streaming the program that they have for the rest of the day. I think they were probably prepared for Biden and Harris, and they're just not showing up yet. Yeah, 112,000 people are waiting. Boris Stream is playing U.S. podium. They ran out of tea. Gasoline prices. Oh, I guess we can check the market. So while we wait, we can listen to their relaxing music. Alright, it looks like markets... I can't believe that Triple Q is actually green today after all this. My daily on Robinhood doesn't look so bad, but if you look at the monthly, I guess that's not so bad either. Look at 3 monthly, it's starting to look ugly now. I mean, really, I'm back to where I was. Oh, we got a German guy.
Orchester Basel. Dirigent Heinz Holliger.
Is that German or like Dutch or something?
Und jetzt folgt der erste Satz aus dem Bläserquintett in S-Dur von Anton Reicher, seinem Opus 88. Sie hören eine Aufnahme mit dem Berner Bläser.
It sounds like German to me. They're making an announcement in German. Alright, we'll hang out for Biden. He should be out any minute. I'm getting a little impatient though, I'm not gonna lie to you. I thought maybe he was just watching the European Parliament. British Parliament. But, alright, in the market... yeah, it's like an entire year's gains gone in a matter of 2 months. Gone. That's German. German. Alright, thanks guys for letting me know that was German and not Dutch. I can't tell the difference, honestly. It's not... Oh, here we go. Here's Joe Biden set to address the nation. Well, it's not a yucky cookie. It's melting because you're not eating it. So here, hold it like this. Give me this piece. Hold this. Hey guys, one of the most important things I want you to keep in mind, no matter what your investments are doing, is that you keep your pull-out game strong. Alright, keep it very, very strong. Yeah, I turned the audio down on the video, so it's just my mic. If you guys can't hear anything, then there you go. There's your cookie wrapped in a $100 bill. Yeah, you know, I picked probably the worst time possible ever to quit my day job. Because as soon as I quit... Oh, here we go. They're testing their audio. Alright, it's coming, guys. If you guys want volume on this, I could turn it up, but I'm keeping the volume on the actual video down because they're not talking about anything. Yeah, being a father is a wonderful experience until you're trying to do something. Then it becomes difficult. She's about 2 years old, and she's my first and only, so... Been a dad for about 2 years. No kittens, no pets. Now, Quantum, it's all YouTubing and, yeah, trading. Like, I made sure that I didn't quit my job until I felt like I had enough, I hate saying passive income, but that's really what it is, enough low-effort income to make sure that even if things go catastrophically wrong, I'd be able to sustain myself. So I made sure I had over $1,000 a month in dividend first. Felt like I could get another at least a couple thousand a month in covered call premium. I've got my pension, that's $800, and I get almost free health care. It's $50 a month. Yeah. Oh, you pulled out a gray hair? Thank you. Thank you. You'll have them one day. Not for a long time, though. And yeah, Buck, that's exactly what I meant by pull-out game. But then, you know, I was a millionaire for about 1 week at the very peak. And now I actually don't know how much I have now. It's probably like 800,000 and change. But a huge difference. I mean, it's the feeling of when I had just quit the day before my 31st birthday. I felt like I was the king of the world. Now I'm like, should I just go back to work? I mean, I'm sure they're going to be hiring again, you know, especially if somebody has Russia experience. But I mean, this is, I'm good. Like, it's not like I'm going to go into debt or can't pay my bills or something. It's just the massive, I miss my paychecks is all I'm saying. I miss getting that $7,000 a month without having to, this guy's getting started. I miss my paycheck that I can just invest without having any bills attached to it. No, a guy with no name, my total income a month is probably like 11,000. Then my wife makes another like 4, so we're fine. But when you're dumping your money into a market that just keeps crashing. My old day job was a cartographer at the Pentagon. And I'm still in the group chat with my old colleagues, and they're absolutely losing their shit right now. Because everybody wants to know where what the new map of Ukraine looks like, and nobody knows. And yeah, I do have a security clearance if I ever needed to go back to work. And I also am licensed to sell life insurance if I really need to. That was what if I couldn't find a job in DC, I was going to be a life insurance guy. That's still an option for me. I just renewed it just in case, but it's not really what I aspire to do. But it's an option if things really go not according to plan. Zoris, thank you. I think that's your 3rd or 4th super chat. Thank you so much. I don't have my money gun, but I'll drop it for you. Thank you. You want to get up? All right. We're still waiting for Joe Biden here. I don't know what he's doing. If you guys want to buy life insurance, Leonel Chavez, I'll be more than happy to get you on a nice term life policy so that you have to pay a very low rate and you can invest the rest of your money into the stock market, because that's usually the idea. When I was studying to be a financial advisor, I'm not a financial advisor. I didn't get licensed because you can't be a YouTuber based on finance and a financial advisor. But when I was studying for that track, I learned that the reason that life insurance or financial advisors always try to get you to buy expensive life insurance is because most people are dumb as shit. So if you give them an investing account, they're going to lose all their money. So we say, you know, in finance, like people that actually know what we're talking about, we say, get a nice term life insurance policy. Make sure that you can pay for your own funeral. Don't be a freaking cheapskate. Make sure your family has money if you die, because the spy doesn't give your family money if you die. But you don't want to go for those extremely expensive life insurance policies, because typically you'll outperform if you just drop your money into the indexed ETFs and have a term policy. That's the ideal, typically. But most people, they can't spell S&P. They can't spell triple Q. They don't know what you're talking about. So the main approach to people that clearly don't know what they're doing, just buy your life insurance policy, get your 4% a year, and then you're fine. That's why people go so heavily toward life insurance policies. So anaphylaxis, you can be a licensed financial advisor and record YouTube vids, but you can't do what I'm doing. Like the company that I was getting ready to work for, they were like, you got to pick one or the other because it will be a violation of FINRA regulations. If you do what you're doing on YouTube and you come work for us as a financial advisor, you can't do both. Because then by default, everything I say on YouTube is a financial advisor. I don't know if I just said that correctly. Everything that I say on YouTube would be counted as financial advice, which could put me in trouble. Right now, since I'm not licensed, I don't have to say this is not financial advice. I can do basically whatever I want to, short of saying that I'm a financial advisor. As long as I don't lie to anybody about what I'm qualified to do, I'm good. If I were to start telling people that I'm your fiduciary, I'd get in trouble.
Yucky.
Yeah, that would be yucky, right?
Yucky.
Yeah, Daddy would get in trouble. I'm a little bit disappointed about that because I think there should be a more clear line between what's financial advice and what isn't among YouTubers. I feel like I should be able to be a proper financial advisor and also do what I'm doing on YouTube, but FINRA regulations don't allow that. So all I did, the furthest I got was getting licensed for the life insurance part. I never took the Series 7 and 66. Yep. Yeah, like deep fucking value. Somebody just mentioned him. GBR breakdown. Yeah, he came under some pressure. I wish it were as easy as saying just not financial advice. But that actually doesn't do anything. There is no legal obligation between me and my viewers. As long as I don't pretend there's one, I'm fine. You want your binky? Well, Biden said sorry to keep you waiting. Here he is. Do not interrupt this right now.
The Russian military has begun a brutal assault on the people of Ukraine.
Where is he?
Without provocation, without justification, without necessity. This is a premeditated attack. Vladimir
You guys good on the sound?
Planning this for months, as we've been saying all along. He moved more than 175,000 troops, military equipment and positions along the Ukrainian border. He moved blood supplies into position and built a field hospital, which tells you all you need to know about his intentions all along. He rejected every good faith effort the United States and our allies and partners made to address our mutual security concerns through dialogue to avoid needless conflict and avert human suffering. For weeks, we have been warning that this would happen. And now, it's unfolding largely as we predicted. In the past week, we've seen shelling increase in the Donbass, a region in eastern Ukraine controlled by Russian-backed separatists. The Russian government has perpetrated cyber attacks against Ukraine. We saw a staged political theater in Moscow, outlandish and baseless claims that Ukraine was about to invade and launch a war against Russia, that Ukraine was prepared to use chemical weapons, that Ukraine committed a genocide. Without any evidence, we saw a flagrant violation of international law in attempting to unilaterally create two new so-called republics on sovereign Ukrainian territory. And at the very moment that the United Nations Security Council was meeting to stand up for Ukraine's sovereignty, to stave off invasion, Putin declared his war. Within moments, missile strikes began to fall on historic cities across Ukraine. Then came the air raids, followed by tanks and troops rolling in. We've been transparent with the world. We've shared declassified evidence about Russia's plans and cyber attacks and false pretexts so that there could be no confusion or cover-up about what Putin was doing.
I'm trying to pay attention to the president, but this chick on the side, like I can't pay attention to Joe Biden.
Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
I'm going to meme that
Today,
shit so
I'm
hard.
authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time. We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies. And I want to be clear, the United States is not doing this alone. For months, we've been building a coalition of partners representing well more than half the global economy. 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, to amplify the joint impact of our response. I just spoke with the G7 leaders this morning, and we're in full and total agreement. We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy. We'll limit their ability to do that. We're going to stunt the ability to finance and grow the Russian military. We're going to impose and we're going to impair their ability to compete in high-tech 21st century economy. We've already seen the impact of our actions on Russia's currency and the ruble, which early today hit its weakest level ever in history. The Russian stock market plunged today. The Russian government borrowing rates spiked by over 15%. And today's actions We've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than 1/3 of Russia's banking assets by itself, cut it off from the U.S. financial system. And today, we're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen. This includes VTB, the second largest bank in Russia, which has $250 billion in assets. As promised, we're also adding the names to the list of Russian elites and their family members that were sanctioned as well. As I said on Tuesday, these are people who personally gain from the Kremlin's policies, and they should share in the pain. We will keep up this drumbeat of those designations against corrupt billionaires in the days ahead. On Tuesday, we stopped the Russian government from raising money from U.S. or European investors. Now we're going to apply the same restrictions to Russia's largest state-owned enterprises, companies with assets that exceed $1.4 trillion. Some of the most powerful impacts of our actions will come over time as we squeeze Russia's access to finances and technology for strategic sectors of its economy and degrade its industrial capacity for years to come. Between our actions and those of our allies and partners, we estimate that we'll cut off more than half of Russia's high-tech imports. It'll strike a blow to their ability to continue to modernize their military. It'll degrade their aerospace industry, including their space program. It'll hurt their ability to build ships, reducing their ability to compete economically. And it will be a major hit to Putin's long-term strategic ambitions.
This chick is amazing.
And we're preparing to do more. In addition to the economic penalties we're imposing, we're also taking steps to defend our NATO allies, particularly in the East. Tomorrow, NATO will convene a summit. We'll be there to bring together the leaders of 30 allied nations and close partners to affirm our solidarity and to map out the next steps we will take to further strengthen all aspects of our NATO alliance. Although we provided over $650 million in defensive assistance to Ukraine just this last year, let me say it again, our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies and reassure those allies in the East.
We're going to go fight them in Kamchatka.
As I made crystal clear, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power. And the good news is, NATO is more united and more determined than ever. There is no doubt that the United States and every NATO ally will meet our Article 5 commitments, which says an attack on one is an attack on all. Over the past few weeks, I ordered thousands of additional forces to Germany and Poland as part of our commitment to NATO. On Tuesday, in response to Russia's aggressive action, including its troop presence in Belarus and the Black Sea, I've authorized the deployment of ground and air forces already stationed in Europe to NATO's eastern flank allies, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania. Our allies have also been stepping up, adding the other allies, the rest of NATO, adding their own forces and capabilities to ensure collective defense. And today, within hours of Russia's unleashing its assault, NATO came together and authorized an activation of response plans. This will enable NATO's high readiness forces to deploy and when and where they're needed to protect our NATO allies on the eastern boundaries of Europe. And now I'm authorizing additional U.S. force capabilities to deploy to Germany as part of NATO's response, including some of the U.S.-based forces that the Department of Defense placed on standby weeks ago. I've also spoken with Defense Secretary Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, about preparations for additional moves should they become necessary to protect our NATO allies and support the greatest military alliance in the history of the world, NATO. As we respond, my administration is using the tools, every tool at its disposal to protect American families and businesses from rising prices at the gas pump. You know, we're taking active steps to bring down the cost, and American oil and gas companies should not exploit this moment to hike their prices to raise profits. You know, in our sanctions package, we specifically designed to allow energy payments to continue. We are closely monitoring energy supplies for any disruption. We've been coordinating with major oil producing and consuming countries toward our common interest to secure global energy supplies. We are actively working with countries around the world to elevate collective release from the strategic petroleum reserves of major energy consuming countries. And the United States will release additional barrels of oil as conditions warrant. I know this is hard and that Americans are already hurting. I will do everything in my power to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me. But this aggression cannot go unanswered. If it did, the consequences for America would be much worse. America stands up to bullies. We stand up for freedom. This is who we are. Let me also repeat the warning I made last week. If Russia pursues cyber attacks against our companies, our critical infrastructure.
Uh-oh. There we go. Uh-oh, losing volume.
The private sector to cyber defenses, sharpen our ability to respond to Russian cyber attacks as well. I spoke last night to President Zelensky of Ukraine, and I assured him that the United States, together with our allies and partners in Europe, will support the Ukrainian people as they defend their country. We'll provide humanitarian relief to ease their suffering. And in the early days of this conflict, Russia propaganda outlets will keep trying to hide the truth and claim success for its military operation against a made-up threat. But history has shown, time and again, how swift gains in territory eventually give way to grinding occupations, acts of mass civil disobedience, and strategic dead ends. The next few weeks and months will be hard on the people of Ukraine. Putin has unleashed a great pain on them, but the Ukrainian people have known 30 years of independence. They've repeatedly shown that they will not tolerate anyone who tries to take their country backwards. This is a dangerous moment for all of Europe, for the freedom around the world. Putin has committed an assault on the very principles that uphold the global peace. But now, the entire world sees clearly what Putin and his Kremlin allies are really all about. This was never about a genuine security concerns on their part. It was always about naked aggression, about Putin's desire for empire by any means necessary, by bullying Russia's neighbors through coercion and corruption, by changing borders by force, and ultimately by choosing a war without a cause. Putin's actions betray a sinister vision for the future of our world, one where nations take what they want by force. But it is a vision that the United States and freedom-loving nations everywhere will oppose with every tool of our considerable power. The United States and our allies and partners will emerge from this stronger, more united, more determined, and more purposeful. And Putin's aggression against Ukraine will end up costing Russia dearly, economically and strategically. We will make sure of that. Putin will be a pariah on the international stage. Any nation that countenances Russia's naked aggression against Ukraine will be stained by association. When the history of this era is written, Putin's choice to make a totally unjustifiable war on Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. Liberty, democracy, human dignity, these are the forces far more powerful than fear and oppression. They cannot be extinguished by tyrants like Putin and his armies. They cannot be erased by from people's hearts and hopes by any amount of violence and intimidation. They endure. In the contest between democracy and autocracy, between sovereignty and subjugation, make no mistake, freedom will prevail. God bless the people of a free and democratic Ukraine, and may God protect our troops. Associated Press, Zeke.
He's actually going to do questions. All right, I'm surprised. I was ready to cut him off.
With President Putin at this point, and what interactions have you had with the Russian government?
I heard the first part. Do I have any plans to speak with Putin at this point, and what?
What communications have you had with the Kremlin as far as military operations in Ukraine and making sure this does not spiral into a larger conflict?
Well, it's a large conflict already. The way we're going to ensure it's not going to spiral to a larger conflict is by providing all the forces needed in the Eastern European nations that are members of NATO. NATO is more united than it's ever been, and I have no plans to talk with Putin. Wall Street Journal, Tarina.
Mr. President, you didn't mention SWIFT in your sanctions that you announced. Is there a reason why the U.S. Isn't doing that? Is there a disagreement among allies regarding SWIFT and whether Russia should be allowed to be a part of it?
The sanctions that we proposed on all their banks have of equal consequence, maybe more consequence than SWIFT, number one. Number two, it is always an option, but right now that's not the position that the rest of Europe wishes to take. Cecilia Vega, ABC.
Sir, sanctions clearly have not been enough to deter Vladimir Putin to this point. What is going to stop him? How and when does this end? And do you see him trying to go beyond Ukraine? And a second question I'll just give to you now. This statement that he gave last night, the threat that he gave, the West will face consequences greater than any you have faced in history. Is he threatening a nuclear strike?
I have no idea what he's threatening. I know what he has done, number one. And number two, no one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening. It has to show, this is going to take time, and we have to show resolve so he knows what's coming. And so the people of Russia know what he's brought on them. That's what this is all about. This is going to take time. It's not going to occur. He's going to say, oh my God, these sanctions are coming, I'm going to stand down. He's going to test the resolve of the West to see if we stay together, and we will. We will, and it will impose significant costs on him.
Will he go beyond Ukraine, sir? Do you see him going beyond?
Yes.
Two topics, just really quick. First, markets are down and gas prices are up. I know you always stress the difference between Wall Street and Main Street, but everybody seems to be in for some economic pain. How economically painful is it going to get for people in this country? And I do have one more question.
First of all, there's no doubt that when a major nuclear power attacks and invades another country, that the world is going to respond, and markets can respond all over the world. So there's no doubt about that, number one. Number two, the notion that this is going to last for a long time is highly unlikely as long as we continue to stay resolved in imposing the sanctions we're going to impose on Russia, period. What's the next question? I'm sorry.
The next question is, did you underestimate Putin? And would you still describe him the way that you did in the summer as a worthy adversary?
At the time, he was, I made it clear, as an adversary, and I said he was worthy. I didn't underestimate him. And I've read most of everything he's written. Did you read it? I shouldn't, I'm not being a wise guy. You heard the speech he made, almost an hour's worth of speeches, why he was going into Ukraine. He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about. And I think that his ambitions are completely contrary to the place where the rest of the world has arrived.
You're confident that these devastating sanctions are going to be as devastating as Russian missiles and bullets and tanks?
Yes, Russian bullets, missiles, and tanks in Ukraine. Yes, I am.
Thank you, President Biden. If sanctions cannot stop President Putin, what penalty can?
I didn't say sanctions couldn't stop him.
You've been talking about the threat of these sanctions for several weeks now.
Yes, but the threat of the sanctions and imposing the sanctions and seeing the effect of the sanctions are two different things. They're two different things. And we're now he's going to begin to see the effect of the sanctions.
And what will that do? How will that change his mindset here, given he's
because
attacking
it will so
Ukraine
weaken his country that he'll have to make a very, very difficult choice as to whether to continue to move toward being a second-rate power or in fact respond.
You said in recent weeks that big nations cannot bluff when it comes to something like this. You recently said that the idea of personally sanctioning President Putin was on the table. Is that a step that you're prepared to take? And if not,
It's not a bluff, it's on the table.
Sanctioning President Putin?
Yes.
Why not sanction him today, sir?
Mr. President?
Why not sanction him today, sir?
Oh boy, you got to answer that question.
If I can, you detailed some severe and swift new sanctions today and said the impact it will have over time. But given the full-scale invasion, given that you're not pursuing disconnecting Russia from what's called SWIFT, the international banking system, or other sanctions at your disposal, respectfully, sir, what more are you waiting for?
Specifically, with the sanctions we've imposed exceed SWIFT. The sanctions we imposed exceed anything that's ever been done. The sanctions we imposed have generated 2/3 of the world joining us. They are profound sanctions. Let's have a conversation in another month or so to see if they're working. Yes.
Can I ask you about Zelensky? Sir, you spoke to Vladimir Zelensky yesterday, sir?
What's the risk that we are watching the beginning of another Cold War, and is there now a complete rupture in U.S. and Russian relations?
There is a complete rupture right now in U.S.-Russian relations if they continue on this path that they're on. And in terms of a Cold War, that depends. You have the vast majority of the rest of the world in total opposition to what he's doing, from Asia to South America to Europe to around the world. And so it's going to be a cold day for Russia. The idea, you don't see a whole lot of people coming to his defense.
And are you, if I could follow up, sir, are you urging China to help isolate Russia? Are you urging China to help isolate Russia?
I'm not prepared to comment on that at the moment. Wait, no. Yeah. No. He's had his hand up a long time.
Thank you, Mr. President. How concerned are you that Putin wants to go beyond Ukraine into other countries and the U.S. will have to get involved if he moves into NATO countries?
Well, if he did move into NATO countries, he will be involved. We will be involved. The only thing that I'm convinced of is if we don't stop now, he'll be emboldened. If we don't move against him now with these significant sanctions, he will be emboldened. And look, every, well, anyway.
Can you talk anything more about your conversation? Mr. President. Why not sanction Putin directly today? Defense partner for the... Sir,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sir, India, which is a major defense partner of the United States, is India fully with you on the issue of Ukraine and Russia?
Does the Defense Department of the United States...
Sir, India is one of your major defense partners. Is India fully in sync with the United States on Russia?
We're in consultation with India today. We haven't resolved that completely.
One more question.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you.
I mean, for a Joe Biden speech, that wasn't all that bad. I was expecting it to be much more out of control than that. Up until the end there, where the reporters started getting a little bit wild with each other, I think Biden held it together pretty well. I would have liked to see him directly answer the question about why not sanction Putin directly, and I wonder if he's got a good reason and they're just not sharing it yet. They're not prepared to share that information. If that's so, he should have just said it. And anyway, I mean, that's what we're at. That's the point we're at here now, where Russia has attacked Ukraine, and the Western world isn't doing anything militarily, but we are sanctioning them pretty heavily. And if Joe Biden is to be believed, then the sanctions that we're putting on them would be more crippling than pulling Russia out of SWIFT, which would crush their economy. Now, according to the stock market, it doesn't look like the Russians were overly concerned because my puts, I'm still green on my Russia ETF puts, but not nearly as much as I was before Joe Biden started talking. In fact, the Russian market has been going up since 11:42 a.m. East Coast time, so it's been about 3 hours. Yeah, all right. It looks like the U.S. markets are pretty pleased with that. We're actually green on the NASDAQ, and SPY is close. I think we're down less than 1% now, which is a big shift from this morning. You want to go to night-night? All right, my daughter's ready for bed, so I'm gonna bounce pretty soon. All right, SPY is hovering at about 419, so that's a big difference from this morning when it was at 411. So, big shift. I rolled up my TQQQ short puts. I wanted big tax deduction because I was down like 40 grand on TQQQ, so I sold the shares for a big loss and then sold puts, in the money puts, expecting to get assigned in about 1 month. So that allows me to still participate in TQQQ's recovery, but I will still lock in the big tax deduction. And a $40,000 tax deduction is going to last me like, what's that, 13 years? All right, you ready for bed? All right. Daughter's ready for nap time, but you guys can catch me on Discord. The Discord link is in the chat. I'll be there. You can... I read almost every one of my YouTube comments, so you know where to find me. All right. Good luck, everybody. Happy trading. I'll see you next time.